Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the NSSR. This is your host, MD-Talks, and we're encouraging you to run your own race to medical school one day at a time. Today, I have a fantastic guest with me, and I'm super excited for you to meet him. So without further ado, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dileep. I'm originally from Minnesota, and I'm currently a fifth year now MD-PhD student at the Mayo Clinic.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We're super excited to have you. I'm personally excited to get to hear your story and let everybody else hear because I think it's going to be amazing. So the first question I always ask everybody is just give the viewers a 10,000-foot view of how you kind of deviated from the traditional mold that we give pre-meds. How was that different for you?
Well, I guess the most unusual part about my story is probably before even undergrad. So I grew up in Minnesota, and when I hit high school, I ended up doing some research at the University of Minnesota right around when I was 15, and found a really great mentor there, Pat Schliebert, and that really kind of got me interested in thinking about this MD-PhD path. It was good, and that opened up doors in terms of having maybe a career in research, but academically it kind of took me off the course.
Right.
So, my grades in high school suffered, and I didn't graduate. So at that point, I decided to stay on at the University of Minnesota for a year and do a little bit more research. But this time, instead of the medical microbiology work that I was doing before, I worked more on like yeast genetics. And that's where I kind of figured out maybe I was really more interested in maybe the human biology or sort of human diseases, because it just didn't click with me. I mean, it was interesting work, but it didn't get me up in the morning, get me really excited. So from there, I'd actually gotten a email from a new professor at Johns Hopkins that wanted to help him start his lab there. So I moved from Minnesota in 1920, and then moved out to Baltimore at that point, and helped him start up this lab. It was really focused on pulmonary pathology, and really looking at specifically like the epigenetics in lung endothelial cells. So I was able to use some of the knowledge I had gleaned from my work in the yeast genetics lab to kind of get that work going. After a couple of years there, a position opened up to manage a lab in oncology. Wow. So after about 2 years at Hopkins, I made the switch over to an oncology lab. Was working with another great mentor, Hy Levitsky and Drew Pardole. They really were pioneers in tumor immunology. So this is about 2004. Back before people had really thought a lot about using the immune system to treat cancer. This was really exciting to me, and it connected back to what I did in high school with some of the medical microbiology, bacterial immunology stuff. So it really clicked with me. And from there, I managed that lab for a couple of years and developed a good relationship with one of the postdocs who connected me with some of his graduate school mentors. We decided to they were in the process of starting a company, and I kind of came along with them to get that off the ground.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So this was about 2006. So they were really big players in HIV. So some of the co-founders of the company were Bob Gallo, who was one of the people that he discovered IL-2 and arguably really connected HIV as the causative agent for AIDS back in the early 80s, and helped develop the first blood test for it. And then his partner was Bob Redfield, who was a director at the Institute of Human Virology, where they were in Baltimore, but now is actually, it turns out to be the director of the CDC. So he's getting a lot of airtime now. We got that company off the ground in 2005, 2006. And from there, just focused on my research for about 5 years there. We got some grants and we got some investors, and we were doing HIV vaccines, cancer vaccines, cancer immunotherapies. That was really the focus of my work. But at later on, as the company was growing, it wanted to sort of split off into a couple parts, and I had the opportunity. I could either go start another company or go back to school. And I knew it had always been kicking around in my mind of doing the MD-PhD. And all my mentors at Hopkins were MDs, Gallo and Redfield, and sort of the people that were saying the direction for our for the vision of our company and for our research were all MDs. So they were really taking the patient experience and in using that to define interesting research questions or useful research questions. So at that point I decided, well, I'm just going to go back to school. Started applying to colleges with help of a lot of mentors, and ended up in Boston at Harvard for undergrad. Started there a bit later. Having gone through that whole process, I think was very useful because it helped me helped me figure out what I wanted to study, because had I gone in initially, I think I would have just gone straight through the straight biology to pre-med route and just had a very not so interesting undergraduate career. But
well, that's for sure. Famous people, science people. Okay.
Yeah. By doing that, I decided to focus. I did end up concentrating in a biology discipline, but I added in a senior thesis in biomedical engineering, and did a secondary concentration in computer science. So that really helped. That was really sort of guided by my industry experience, where we were dealing with a lot of large data sets. And I think that's why that was sort of really the exciting future of research, was to not so much be in the lab pipetting and figuring out little small, doing small projects, but pretty much small projects of the future are going to generate large data sets. And so
very true.
So the idea there is getting the computer science training and some of the bioengineering training that would help me deal with larger scale experiments. When it came to be about graduation, I was going to go straight into medical school, but I didn't have all my, all the prerequisites that I needed in place, and including the MCAT was changing about that time. So I didn't.
That's right.
Didn't hit a few hiccups there in terms of timing. Again, it was like another not so smooth part towards the tail end, even though I had it all planned out. So took on a few research projects at various institutions at the Broad Institute in Massachusetts General Hospital. At the same time, I was working consulting on a startup company that came out of Harvard Business School.
Wow.
And then I used that gap year to work on that and submit all my applications for MD-PhD programs.
Right.
And from there, then I ended up at my first choice was to come back home to Minnesota, Mayo.
That was amazing. Just because you're interested in medicine doesn't necessarily mean there's not more that you're interested in. So I do have a couple questions to pick on from your story that I think will serve the viewers very well, especially many people that can connect to this type of story. The first thing I wanted to ask is, you talked a lot about the importance of mentors. Mentors at every stage of your life have kind of directed where you ended up, the connections you made, the next steps you took. For someone out there who is perhaps interested in something, maybe not even medicine related, and just doesn't know where to start, how would you recommend connecting with a mentor? Yeah,
that's a really tricky thing. It's not just connecting with a mentor, it's really connecting with someone that clicks with you and that inspires you. There are a lot of people out there that are willing to mentor you, or at least put in some effort into it. And I think I was tremendously lucky. If I look back at my path, I mentioned Pat Schliebert being my first mentor there. We really clicked and had a really successful partnership. early on that I think got me on this path. Putting yourself out there, and I think just being a curious person, I think helps a lot. Asking good questions. I mean, part of how I made that connection, how I made a lot of other connections is ask questions in class, whether it's in a high school class or a college class. Go to office hours, get to know your TAs, your faculty members. I mean, anyone really could be a mentor to you, and they can, even if there may not be the person that you initially interact with, they may know somebody that would be a good mentor to you, and they can make introductions for you. And it's a skill that I think will last an entire lifetime, just because it's basically at the professional level, it's what you call networking.
Exactly.
I mean, instead of looking for a mentor, which you always find a mentor later on in your career, but you look for business partners or your next job. But start learning how to do that early on is so important.
For people that, for instance, have been out of the school world for years and feel like, this is something that I may want to do, what is your advice to them when their concern is, I feel like I am, quote unquote, too old to go back to school or to med school or anything like that?
You need to have a mindset where you're willing to open yourself up to be molded or reshaped. Because I think, age is really just, I mean, people always say it's just a number, and in many ways it is. But I think the sort of issue that most people probably face going back to school is that they become so rigid in their ways of thinking. And they've really become inflexible. It's really not so much an age issue, it's an inflexibility issue. Maybe you've done something outside of medicine and you've decided to have a career in that and maybe start a family, and you have all these pieces that, settle down, buy a house. And, in Baltimore, I own my home, but at the same time, like you have to clear out parts of your life that are not working for you, like maybe your career or your job, in order to make room for your education, and then understand that the education is going to take your life in a different direction than the trajectory you're on, and that's really the flexibility part. It's like now you're going to be bent into a different direction, and you're opening yourself up to that. And I think that's the first set. It's all a mindset thing.
How was your perspective influenced by your experiences?
Well, I think it influenced me in many ways. I mean, so I came in it through the MD-PhD route, which is unusual among medical students to begin with. But I think I came in with a better sense of what I wanted to get out of it, in terms of, I really came into it as an opportunity to sort of redefine my interests. So many of my interests were shaped, by my previous mentors. When you come into medical school, you're exposed to all these fields, and you get to see everything. And you kind of get to open yourself up and say, like, well, what am I truly curious about, or what really clicks with me? I want to know more about things, which is an asset when you're trying to figure out research projects. It can be a liability when you're studying for large standardized tests, or
this is true
through the day. So I think it also helped me in terms of other aspects. I know the people that come through straight through high school, undergrad, medical school, they're really, their minds seem to be selected for ones that are really good at memorizing things, and they have really just good rote memory and like that stuff like that. But my memory doesn't quite work like that. But it turns out having all this experience helped me, because my memory really works by making connections with other things, and having done a lot of stuff in tangential to medicine and in medical research, I had a good framework that I could start hanging things off of. So we would see a concept in class, and then I was able to connect it to a project I did in industry or at Hopkins or something like that.
My penultimate question is, for someone who is thinking about the MD-PhD program or has heard of it and doesn't really understand it, can you break down what the MD-PhD program is, and who you think would be a good fit for?
The fundamental level, an MD-PhD program is combining medical training, so the MD part, with research training, which is the PhD part. And you do them somewhat simultaneously. You just do one application, you're in this program, and you get both degrees. The particular breakdown for each program is slightly different. Mayo, for the most part, and historically has been one where you do 2 years of medical school, and then you do about 4 years for the PhD, and then you come back and you do 2 more years of medical school. They call it like a 2 + 4 + 2 program. And increasingly in Mayo and in other places, it's becoming more and more integrated. MD-PhDs typically pick residencies that have that fit well with research. So I mean, oftentimes internal medicine and subspecialties going off of that. They tend to pathology and radiology, things that give more flexibility for research. But that's not to say that you can't apply them in surgical specialties. In fact, I'm very much considering surgical specialties.
Yay!
And I think in terms of certain like primary care and stuff in emergency medicine, stuff that is more general in terms of practice, it's harder to define research questions coming out of that. So MD-PhDs typically don't go that route, but you can go any route you want with it, and you're certainly encouraged to carve your own path.
Yeah, literally take your own not so smooth road and go wherever you want. So what would you say would be not an ideal, right? Because the whole point of this is to not be ideal, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But what are the things that you say, if you're thinking this type of way, if you're oriented in this manner, that you maybe should think about the MD-PhD versus an MD, for instance?
Well, I would say that if you're thinking in your science classes a lot about why things are the way they are, or if you want to know like how things work more so than what's kind of given to you in your science classes, and you find yourself, doing internet deep dives late at night trying to figure out, what was, okay, we learned this chemical reaction, organic chemistry, but what other ways can you do it? Or, and you learned about this organism in your microbiology class, but now you kind of want to know, like, how does metabolism work? Where was it found? Or like, where do you see it outside of the human body? And so if you're an innately curious person, I think that it fits pretty well. I think also you have to have, they always say, like, you have to be fine with sort of deferring the rewards of all of this, because you won't, by doing the MD-PhD, you immediately tack on a few more years to what, even coming from a non-traditional background, you're adding on a few more years to it. So, but I think that also fits well for non-traditional students, because, they're already comfortable with that. They've already put off, pursuing their dream of medicine for so long that, adding a few more years probably doesn't make a big difference anymore. But I find it to be tremendously rewarding as a result.
And some people don't know much about it other than, I know that they get funded for 8 years in med school, but they don't really know what it entails. So thank you for breaking that down. Yeah,
that's not a reason why to do it. By the way, just because if you do the math, like, I think as a physician, you're making a comfortable 6-figure salary, and total of med school, if you're paying out of pocket, I mean, all of med school will cost you like $200,000-$300,000. If you pick, I don't know, like I don't know what an average OB-GYN makes, but probably at least $200,000 a year, and then you do that for 4 years, that's $800,000, which is more than you would have saved, by doing a PhD. Of course, everyone's finances are slightly different and stuff like that, but if you're purely looking at this from a money perspective,
don't do that.
Yeah, you need to go back to like elementary math again to figure it out, because you definitely don't make more money. And in fact, when you look at the end too, the careers that MD-PhDs tend to take, I mean, they tend to look for more academic careers on the far end, and they also tend to look for jobs where they have more protected time for research. And
very true.
Consequently, the salaries, are maybe a little bit lower, certainly not greater than their MD counterpart.
I'm willing to bet there were a lot of things that you had concerns about. Like this, again, was a not so smooth road for you. Can you speak a little bit to those and how you handled them?
Yeah, so I mean, everyone's situation is probably going to be different, but I think it gets back into the whole flexibility issues. One thing is like, I own my house, I had a mortgage. I'm like, how am I going to pay for this if I'm in school? So finances is definitely a big thing because you're typically taking a big pay cut, stopping working, and then starting to pay money for school.
Yeah.
At least for undergrad and for medical school. MD-PhD is a little bit different, but still making less than what you would make having a full-time job.
Right.
And so that was one thing. But I think throughout my career, I always had this in part of my plan. So I was always saving money aside so that I could make this a reality. I think that was one big part of it, but obviously I was able to figure that out. I wasn't married or didn't have kids or anything like that. So I think those are probably going to be like other big considerations people have to take into account. Like if they're not the sole decision maker in this journey, it's like, if you're married and, this is not entirely your decision.
That's true.
So you want to make sure that it works in terms of that. I was blessed that I could make a selfish decision here to go back. That worked for me. Get rid of as many stressors as you can. So the financial one's a big one, and also making sure that even if you can make a selfish decision, that you have a support network in place that your parents don't necessarily have to agree with it. Although typically most parents seem to like their kids to go to med school, but not everyone does. And I think just making sure that they're on board, that you have people that you can call when you're studying for your boards and stuff like that. And just you'll make new friends in med school, but make sure that your support network is in a good space, because you won't be able to tend to even friendships as much just because you may be moving away from medical school. Your time is really tight, so you need to factor that into account as well.
But thank you so much for walking us through your story, your incredible story, I must say. Say someone, sees your story and identifies with it and wants to ask more questions, get to know you more. How would they be able to do that?
Well, I guess they could probably hit me up on Twitter might be the easiest way, like at Dileep Moni on Twitter.
And the same thing goes on this channel. If you see something that you're really passionate about, see a story that you really connect to and want to reach out, please do. We're happy to support you, happy to connect with you, happy to get you connected to people that are like you and going through similar things or have gone through similar things. On that note, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you, Dileep, for being here. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the notification bell for more information on this channel and to get regular updates when new things come out. Thanks, guys!